Now comes the kind of exciting part, which is getting into what I call the big journey and the revolutions of that wheel. And I think this is a very helpful concept for people that are working for change in our world. So the beginning is the same thing as the first turn of the wheel, consensus consciousness. And the leading characteristic of that stage of a person's moral development is conformity. It's where most people start out in this life, and we get a lot of encouragement. The wheel turns once, and we can arrive at something that I would call passive nonviolence. And it's that moment when a person has a great enough degree of conscience that it becomes no longer acceptable to participate in the harm or the exploitation of others. And there's a focus on private behaviors. So changing one's diet for reasons of conscience would be an example of passive nonviolence. You know, in our film The Witness, there's a moment when Eddie, the subject of the film, he talks about a lot of injustices, and then he says, but not because of me. And it's a huge step to actually change one's life. I mean, it's like the difference between being in consensus consciousness and conformity. You know, if the whole journey was this much, half of it is just doing one thing and being serious about it. Once that begins, the progress is really amazing. Okay, the wheel turns again. And think about becoming an activist. Okay, I'm not participating myself, but I realize that I have information that a lot of people don't have. I realize that the pain and the injustice and the suffering is huge, and I need to go out and try to awaken people and change my society. So again, this is a massive change, and it's this feeling of I cannot stand by and do nothing. I must act. It becomes a moral obligation. And what's amazing about this stage in our movement right now is that there are so many people who have reached this stage and they've come to that 8th step of disillusionment. That after making the commitment of saying, you know, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and go take on this impossible issue and try to work for change, they discover that, you know, the problem that I thought was out there is also in here. And in here is not just the circle of people working for change, it's also in here. You know, that's disillusioning. We discover that the ills of our society are encoded in our habits and values and mental models. And so the struggle becomes to, you know, sort of address that disillusionment. A lot of great people fall by the wayside because they can't conquer the disillusionment that comes to an activist. And I know there's a lot of, you know, really experienced activists in this room, and I know that every single person here knows what I'm talking about. It's so deep and so difficult, and we've all struggled with just succumbing to it, and we've also watched great people succumb to it. So the next turn of this wheel I call visionary leadership. What happens as one processes the disillusionment of being an activist is that one starts to understand that separating the goal from the means of achieving the goal is not a workable way to make change happen in the world. That we must unify our path to the goal with the goal itself. It's the same. And once that understanding begins to crystallize, there becomes a focus on safeguarding the integrity of the process. You know, it becomes an inside job. The first thing I have to do is safeguard my own integrity. And then if you know, are part of a group, helping the group maintain the integrity of the process, because that's what's gone wrong with the world, is the commodification, that we use everything as a means to an end. We don't think about what it does to the individual. We don't think about what it does to the system as a whole or to the community. We don't think about what it does to the future. If I pay attention to that and my process looks like the world I want to live in, then I have confidence that every step I take is helping. We're being sold on this idea that handing our power over to large organizations and following the dictates of charismatic leaders is the way to make change happen. And how do we know change is happening? Because they tell us that it's happening. I don't think that's the way to work for change. I think the way to work for change is a way so that you know when you're doing what you're doing. You're seeing the change happening, and you can maintain the quality control because you're the agent of change and you're implementing your values. You're not following orders from above. That's the old way. That's the pyramid. You know, the circle is what's coming. And I think investing in the pyramid and you know, identifying with brands and large organizations and handing our power over into that structure that has basically destroyed the planet, I think is a waste of time. Now, spiritual transcendence could be considered the 5th stage of moral development. people who have come to embody the principles of the cause in all areas of their life, people like Gandhi and other people not so famous, one of the remarkable characteristics of such individuals is that they attend now not only to their actions, but also to their mental world. And they have tremendous mental discipline. So for them to think ill of another, to think violently toward another, is not that different than acting violently. So it's a tremendous level of consistency. And such individuals have this creativity. They reinvent the tradition. They reinterpret the principles of it. And they have this capacity to take individual actions that are just amazing, that inspire other people, and that can change the course of history. That's our potential. And you know, it's really interesting that many people who seem to have attained that level of moral development, when they talk about themselves, they don't think of themselves as being different fundamentally from other people. Their journey and their discovery has been that we have this capacity, and you know, in a sense, it's like do the work, and you know, amazing things will happen. So there's the process of each stage of moral development, and it's like a spiral going through greater and greater integration, greater and greater empowerment, greater and greater vision. And it can be seen as a useful roadmap for self-diagnosis or for helping each other to understand where are we stuck. And as I said before, my observation is that at this period of time, a lot of us are stuck with disillusionment. We're stuck at that stage, struggling because the things that are happening in the world, the things that are happening in our movement, in our own lives, are very difficult to accept and integrate. And we have to support each other in absorbing that experience and distilling the wisdom of it. We're at a time of huge crisis. It's also a time of tremendous potential for evolution. And that's sort of what I see when I look at the world, is that the bad stuff is getting badder. But the good stuff is getting gooder. And there's more people than ever before who are engaged and understanding the larger picture. And that's what it takes to advance on this path.